From the dawn of time, our ancestors have left us with the tales. Stories which speak of things that they have seen and lived alongside by, feared, respected, and even looked to some of them as godlike. Modern man refers to such things as spirits, extraterrestrials, demons, cryptids, creatures, and entities of all kinds, and so much more. These things and tales are now referred by most as myths and legends. But there are those of us that know what our ancestors spoke of was the truth. Those of us that have become obsessed in searching for answers and finding out the truth are here. We need the truth. This search brings us into the realm of the unexplained and unknown. It brings us on the trail. The search for living legends. Please join JR and I on the quest, and welcome to the search.
And 3, 2, 1, and go.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of On the Trail in Search of Living Legends. This is going to be episode 12, and we are honored tonight to have with us an awesome investigator, someone I've wanted to interview for a long time. I know we've all been very excited for this interview, and it is Mr. Rich Germeau out of... Did I say your name right, man? I'm sorry, I should have asked you beforehand.
Yeah, you did great. It's pronounced it like Geronimo.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's an honor to have you with us, Rich. Thanks a lot for agreeing to come on. We all really appreciate it.
Oh no, thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. And as usual, we have Mr. Gary Spikes, Junior. Junior, are you there?
No, I'm not here.
Okay, that's what I was hoping. No, just joking, buddy. How's it going? What's going on tonight?
Been looking forward to this one.
Absolutely. And we have, of course, Mr. Shawn Wilson, the one and only. Shawn, how's it going, sir?
Well, I'm doing all right. Glad to be here, guys. Glad to have Rich on. I've seen some of your stuff. Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Really glad to have you on tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
We've been on a pretty good roll last couple of weeks with some pretty good guests, and this is a good one. Going to be another good one here, so I'm excited. And we have a treat tonight, everybody. Tonight we have none other than Mr. Nate Rudd joining us. Nate, what is going on, my friend?
Thank you. I appreciate you guys letting me sit in on this one.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
I'm not show, Rich, but I twisted their arm to get me in here so I could take part in it.
Cool.
Well, he'll be making more appearances than he thinks, so But no, I think it's awesome having you on, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Rich, I do another show with these guys. It's a roundtable show, and so far it's been a lot of fun. But
yeah, we have a good time.
Are you guys on YouTube? Or what?
We are on YouTube. I'll send you the link. Just remind me before we get off, and I'll send you. I'll send you the link to check out our stuff. It's still in the baby stages, but we've got all our stuff from this year, and I've got all my stuff before Shawn and I Shawn, when Shawn and I started this show last year. Our stuff from last year is on there as well. And this year we've, Gary's come on the team, and Gary was actually an interviewee last year. And Gary, I think, still hates me for that interview because probably still wakes him up at night, don't you, Gary?
Well, it's pretty bad when you have somebody write a scientific paper about your dream responses of your interaction with the target species.
Well, I got to give you credit, though, man. You and I, we had talked a little bit. We didn't really know each other well yet, though. And I remember our mutual friend, and you know who I'm talking about,
Yeah.
He messaged me and he said, hey, he's like, you know, if we're looking for a guest tonight, I've got a great guy. You'd get along great with him. He, you know, military, you know. Give him a ring. He had a real hell of an encounter, and he told me the story, and I said, I got to get this guy on. So I remember messaging you, and there was about a half an hour of hesitation, and then you messaged me back, and you're like,
you know, that
Jeremiah, I'll come on and talk to you. I'll come on and talk.
The first time I talked about that incident outside of my wife and my husband in 5 years.
I know, dude, and there's not a day that goes by I don't appreciate that, because I tell you what, man, it's one of the most intense I've ever heard in my life. But we'll save that for another night. Tonight's Rich, tonight is your show. So anyway, man, the way we'll do it is we're just gonna let you tell your we'll let you tell your story, man. You can start out, just want to give us a little background on yourself, a little bit of a bio, how you got into this crazy world that we're all involved in. That kind of good stuff.
You talking to me now?
Yes, sir. I'm talking to you. Yep.
Okay. Oh yeah. How did I get into it? Yeah. Well.
Yeah. And, location, where you were, all the good pedigree stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the stories on YouTube on the Lonesome Creek sighting that I had, and basically I was just heading into work one day in July of the year 2000, about 7 p.m. So it was perfectly daylight, and I was driving down into La Push, past the housing areas, coming down the hill to the main reservation, right in front of the store and the campground and beaches on the left, and about 70 yards in front of me, 75, this thing just steps out. And by the time I stopped, I was probably 50 yards from it.
Okay.
And it took about 4 steps across the road and disappeared along a fence line that surrounds a little fish hatchery on the other side of the road. And it was big and all one color, really thick from back to chest.
No, yeah, that's what I always say too, man. That's the most impressive part about him to me. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I had to, when you said that. I had to jump in.
No problem. Yeah, and it just kind of, what was really noticeable about it was the gait of it, how it was non-human. That was one of the big indicators that didn't allow me to really classify it as human. That was one of the first things, and it just kind of really eloquently just glided across the road, I guess. I mean, no head bob or anything, and no neck, and all one color. I could even see it had big feet, as it was going across, and it didn't even pay any attention to me. It just went across the road and hit the fence line, and it was gone in the salmonberry bushes immediately, and that was it. And I was kind of taken back by that, obviously, and I was trying to classify it because I'm a trained observer in my job, and it didn't fit into any box. And I was probably sitting there for 20-30 seconds, in shock, essentially.
Yeah.
And trying to classify it, and ultimately knowing what it was, but I didn't have belief in it at that point. So it took me a minute to just admit to myself the truth of it. And then I started to drive back, just finished where I was going, down to the office, which was probably less than a mile, maybe a little more than a mile away from that spot. And I also noticed one of the first things I felt after that was I started to immediately feel kind of betrayed that I hadn't been informed about it before, and that I had to experience this trauma myself, and go through all this when and I had no knowledge base of it because it wasn't taught to us in school or any training in the military or law enforcement or anything like that. So you just had this encounter of this thing that's not supposed to be real, and which results in a traumatic event, more or less, because it's ultimately, it's a belief system type destroying thing, when you see stuff like that. So it starts, you start asking a lot of questions, and like in me in particular, the way that I view the world, it made me start to question a lot of things, not just that, but a lot of things in general, because of the realization that I had just seen something that wasn't supposed to be real.
Right.
And
Rich, can you back up a little bit and tell us? You said you were on your way to work.
yeah.
Can you get into what you were doing? I mean, you said military and law enforcement. Can you tell the audience your line of work and your background there? So, I mean, that kind of lends to your credibility, really.
Yes, it does.
So that day, I was working. I was a La Push police officer at that time, and I was also in the Marine Reserves, and I was doing drills on the weekends. And I had been working in La Push from. Let me see. I started out working for the Department of Defense Police in 1998. I went in the Marine Reserves in January '97. That's when I left for boot camp. And then I worked for DOD until late '99, and then I started working out in Forks La Push, and I worked there until 2003. And the other sighting was in 2000.
Badass.
Oh, I'm just not really. I just, I was a combat engineer in the Marine Reserves, and just try to do different
Very
stuff as
small
being a cop.
percentage of people step up and do that kind of work. I
Absolutely.
thank you for that.
Yes,
Well, thank you.
I do too, man. I gotta, Nate, and I won't lie to you, Nate, and it was kind of, he didn't give me details, but kind of filled me in that, about your ex job, and I just, stop me if I'm crossing the line here, Rich, but I know I got a lot of, I'm way up here in the Adirondacks, like I'm touching Canada. I could literally walk across the border from, my backyard, where I have all this interaction. And I got a lot of friends, and I don't care about if, people will probably get shit for this, but I don't care. I'm going to say it. I have a couple of friends that are Border Patrol up here, and one in particular that's very pissed off about the cover-ups that have been going on. And, I'm not going to get too much involved in that, but they, out of all the law enforcement up here, they see them more than anybody, because they're cruising these back roads, so on and so forth. And they're always literally threatened with their jobs. Their jobs are threatened. You're going to shut up about this. You're going to keep quiet. Had another friend in North Carolina who he and his partner almost hit one. There was people coming one way, people behind them, and the footage. What do you guys call it? The cam footage, the dash footage.
Yeah.
They told their supervisor, and when they got back to the office, he watched it. Next day, it had disappeared, and they said if anyone approaches you that was on that road and saw the same thing, you're going to swear to it that it was a bear if you value your pension and you value your job. So I think that's pretty fucked up. If you don't mind me, like I said, if I cross the line here, stop me. But you have any experience with that whatsoever? Do you know of any other guys that have been spoken to like that by their supervisors?
Nope. I was pretty open with everything. I wasn't shy about talking about anything. Nobody ever did or said anything like that to me. The only experience I have directly with government looking like they covered anything up related to this topic, I'll tell you the story. I don't know that I've talked about it on air, but it's kind of significant. It was very telling to me. I was a detective at the time, and everybody I worked with by then knew about my Bigfoot experience, and so anyhow, the guy who worked forest products, so we have a deputy that was assigned to do nothing but timber products related stuff, and he worked with a couple of timber companies, and he had like weekly or bi-weekly meetings with the Department of Natural Resources out of Olympia, and I think they might have done it up in Shelton, or they might have had the meetings in Olympia, I don't know. And he would go down to these meetings because that was his job, and he went down to this particular meeting this morning, and the sergeant that came in right away told him that, during this briefing, they said we had an incident happen up by Gold Bar. If you know where that is, I'm getting feedback now on my mic.
Can't hear it on our end. Can you guys?
I can hear it. Yeah.
Can you? I can't really hear it. It's weird.
Keep talking, Rich.
Well, mine's better now.
Okay.
It's better.
That's weird.
Okay, so I'll continue then, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sir. Go right ahead.
Okay, so this guy in this meeting, I'm getting second person from the deputy that was attended that meeting. He came later into my office later in that day. It was around just before lunchtime, and he's like, "Oh, I need to tell you this." So, anyways, I'll finish. The sergeant came in this meeting. He said that they had a Bigfoot report by Gold Bar. Older woman and her grandson were walking on a park trail on some state land that's a park, and they had an encounter with a Sasquatch that showed its teeth at them, and it growled at them, and they got scared, and they ran away. So they said that, long story short, what this woman was reported to me, that, okay, let me get this straight. Okay, so he tells me about this, and then he tells me that the DNR officer that got assigned to the case. So he gives me the phone number of the guy, so I call him, and he tells me, "Oh yeah, this woman called our office and left a message, and then this was referred to me to do a call back to her." But he said she had also called Snohomish County 911 first, and they kind of laughed at her, I guess, and then they referred her to the DNR. I'm like, okay, so now I'm thinking to myself that I have two people to call. I have him to call back because he said he's going to contact her and get a statement from her or whatever. And then I was free to call him back and talk to him about it. So I'm like, cool. So, I have to go do some work and a couple hours go by. So I get back to my office and I end up calling Snohomish County 911 because I know from my job that 911 calls come in on recorded lines and they're all recorded. So I contact them and I call a dispatcher and I say, "Hey, yeah, I'm so-and-so. And I'm calling about a woman who called 911 about a Bigfoot report up by Gold Bar somewhere." And she tells me, I don't really know what you're talking about. You want to talk to my supervisor?" And I say, "Sure." So I talk to supervisor and they said, "Oh, let me look for that." And about 10 minutes later, they call me back. "Oh, there's no call like that." They said, "There's nothing in our database. There's no recording of any call like that." I'm like, oh, okay. So then later on, I end up calling try to call that DNR cop back, and a couple of times he doesn't call me back. And then I think I end up getting a hold of him the next day. And he never talked to me again or anything. And apparently everything just got erased or deleted. They didn't, I don't know what they did with the case, but when you contact 911 and they don't know what you're talking about and there's no call anymore, that means that they have to go in and delete them out of the and that stuff all has to be kept. So that was my experience with it, is that it didn't get very far. It becomes a joke at first, and then if there's any legitimacy, it seems to go away. But when I was a sheriff's deputy in Mason County too, I some of the research sites that I worked, I would check the call logs historically to see if there were weird calls or suspicious or strange phenomena calls or in these areas and whatnot. And occasionally, I'd find stuff that the details in it would lead me to believe that it was likely Bigfoot related. But, knowingly cops put in the details of the incidents and whatnot, and they're just relaying what they found out from talking to the people that reported. So they don't even know what they're putting in, but I would see things that I could pick out that say probably was this and not that, or probably was a Bigfoot potentially. And I was able to use that resource a few times to corroborate places I was doing investigations. And it just so happens, just because I had that job, that I had access to that information and stuff.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. Why do you think? I mean, in your opinion, why do you think up here they're so hard on these border patrol guys? Is it because they're a federal agency? You think they're a little hard at them about it, or? It's possible.
I don't know, because I didn't have that same experience. I can tell you one thing, like when I was in La Push, I had that encounter down there, and there was a deputy sheriff that was at the office and a couple other guys I worked with, a sergeant and a regular officer, and they razzed me when I came in, and I wrote a memo to the deputy who took it back to the sheriff's office, and I put a CAD call in and documented the incident down there in La Push. But I don't know anything, but nobody else talked to me about it. But I'll tell you that within 2 weeks after that I had my sighting, that there was a UFO sighting down in La Push, and there was like 12 witnesses.
Oh, wow.
Where a disc-shaped object with lights came down and hovered over James Island at the river mouth, and they all seen it, and then it took off, and they caught it on the radar station because there's the Coast Guard station right there, and the FBI was down there by the next day, and it took the witnesses, and they told everybody it was an experimental aircraft, and so they were all over on top of it, but they didn't come down for the Bigfoot sighting.
Okay, wow, that's some interesting interesting stuff.
I wasn't working that day, but my coworkers that were there told me all about it. They came down and said it was a experimental aircraft, and they came out from Seattle. They were there within 10 hours of the incident. So the Coast Guard must have called them because they caught it all on the radar. So the FBI took the radar recordings and then it had a group interview with all the people and said, "Here, it was just an experimental aircraft." But it was. I talked to people that saw it, and people would go down there and hang out on the river bar at night because there's a big gravel bar.
Yep.
And that's kind of attached to a little town, and they would take half racks of beer down there and just drink and stuff, and they'd stay all night. And there'd usually be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 cars, and so there were multiple occupants and vehicles and stuff that saw this disc-shaped object hover down on top of the island, which is only 150, 200 feet away from them. Maybe 60 feet up on top of the top of this island that's out there where the river comes out and goes around it. And so they all saw it, and they said it had lights around it and stuff, the rim. But yeah, so that's an interesting thing that correlates, at least probably somewhat related to the Bigfoot encounter.
We've been this is it seemed the more last few years, I think we've all talked about it. It seems like all these weird phenomenons are happening in places that used to be known just for one phenomena. You know what I'm saying?
Hey,
and now they're all
Jeremiah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Speaking of UFOs and the word phenomenon, there's a new documentary out now. Well, it's been out for a little bit, but it's called The Phenomenon. And, everybody should check this out. It's Bill Clinton. Who else? A lot of government people talk about the fact that these things exist for real. They're out there, and it should be. I mean, this should be like big. Should be, but everybody's kind of ignoring it. It's so weird.
It is. It should be public knowledge.
Tucker Carlson did a couple bits on it on Fox News. Harry Reid actually talks about it, even though I'm not a big fan of Harry Reid. Harry Reid actually said, there's so much buried right now. He said,
oh my God. Yeah.
It's unreal. Yeah.
It is unreal.
If there's some correlation between Bigfoot and these things and orbs and whatever, I want to know.
I want to know as well, man. Yeah. I mean, shit. I want to know.
There's,
Go ahead, Rich. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Go ahead. Subject comes up.
Related to this, there's one point that I wanted to make, related to your Border Patrol guys.
Yes.
So, based on my experience, my background, one thing that is apparent to me that's just logical is that I understand how the government functions, the military functions, and the fact that Bigfoot in general, as a humanoid biped, I mean, we don't really know what it is other than what some of the DNA studies have said, but the fact that we know that it's out there, based on our personal experience, and it's roaming around North America, it would be considered a threat to national security because it's not controlled by the government, and these things potentially have superhuman type abilities or whatever. And one thing that I know is that when it relates to the government and there's something out there that's outside their control that poses such a threat, that they are going to exhaust every available resource to find out as much as they possibly can about that. They're, as a means for national security and to see if these things potentially could give them information that they could use to their advantage. I also think that the fact that like my encounter as being professional, and seeing one of these things on duty and many other people that have to, it lends to the idea that they do know, because the fact that they don't, as far as I understand, and nobody that I know. And I know Bob Gimlin, I know Ron Moorhead, and these guys, and no government agents from any agency have ever seeked them out or contacted them to interview them and ask them about the encounters or the information that they know related to this topic, which tells you that they already know.
They're aware. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically my take. And the guys with the Border Patrol, I don't know about that because I know people that, I've used to talk to Jeff Meldrum all the time, and he told me a story about a friend of his that was the head scientist for Olympic National Park Service, and he himself had a Class A sighting in the Wenatchee drainage. And this guy was the guy who oversaw all the field biologists and everybody that they had doing scientific research of any kind of data gathering. He oversaw them all in that whole national park. And he had a sighting himself in the Wenatchee in the 90s where he was going up a ridge line and he heard something coming towards him. He thought it was a herd of elk. And he hunkered down in the brush, and Bigfoot walked by him close enough that he could have reached out his arm and grabbed its leg. And he had a clear view of the feet and below the knees. And then he went further to tell me that this guy had relayed to him that 3 of his employees had backcountry Class A sightings themselves. But then when you look at it, when you have the head scientists and people that are working scientifically to gather evidence that have Class A encounters themselves, yet officially these same people will tell you they don't exist, even though they've seen them before. It's strange to me, it's just strange that would occur. I mean, and it lends to me that the reason why that they won't disclose has probably to do with the identity of these things and what they actually are, and whatever information that would reveal.
Yeah.
They're empowering to people to know that.
Yeah. Do you think the theory that and I've always been on the fence about this, but I like to ask it. We've talked about it quite a bit. You think it comes down to money at all? If I know up here in the Adirondacks, it's a huge tourist spot during the summer. I mean, the Adirondack, New York State, and the Adirondack Park system make millions. Yeah. So people find out there's a hairy beast running around up here that exists. Is that going to deter them from coming up here and spending their hard-earned cash? So in turn, that would make sense to me a little bit, that maybe a little bit of it has to do with money. I don't know. Just a theory.
Well,
on that.
I've thought about that, and I think that probably is not the case. I think solely the reason why that whatever these things are is not disclosed totally relates to all the weird stuff that people have repeated. Once you talk to enough people and get involved in this for long enough, you have all this strange otherworldly type behavior and experiences that come from the people that have this stuff. Everything from cloaking to disappearing footprints to people even say they've seen them come out of portholes and everything else. And I think that truthfully, the reason why, and I think it even lends more to the fact that there's so little information. If you do a Freedom of Information request related to the government, related to Bigfoot from all agencies, you'll get almost nothing because they don't want to tell you anything. So I think it tells me that they don't even want to acknowledge it, because I think truly that whatever it is almost a gateway to where if they divulge that, it's going to just open the door to way more questions, and it leads, to our true history, probably the one that's hidden from us that we don't know, and that's probably why. It's a matter of, it's an issue completely, I think, of control and power, and in the fact that if people were to know about this thing, they know about its existence, they know what it actually means. It may change the outlook of every individual potentially in what they value because of this new knowledge that could come to the table, which could challenge control. It can challenge everything to make everything in a situation where people may not want to do the same things. It may be that dramatic. And I think it probably is because of the fact that there's so many sightings, professionals have seen them and whatnot. Yet there's just no acknowledgement of it. It's just like, oh, and you look at me from a situation where my job and what I did during that time, because you have to realize that most of my encounters happened, other than pretty much one, during the commission of my job when I was working. Many of the stuff that happened to me, other than my Harstein sighting, most of it, the significant stuff, all happened while I was on duty working as full capacity as a law enforcement officer. I was on duty, driving my car around or stopping to do something or having a sighting. And the fact that, I'm considered credible because of my job, and I'm a credible witness in the court of law. My testimony is basically considered prima facie evidence related to crimes. Whatever I witness is a crime. Nobody questions whether or not it happened or not. So how come that exists, but the same thing isn't true for Bigfoot? Or is it, but the other thing is that my experience with having this sighting, it never brought into question or challenged my credibility as a witness in court. It just was to the side. So it's almost an acknowledgement on that part. Well, we're not going to say you're crazy and you can't testify in court and be credible anymore just because you say you saw Bigfoot, right? We're not going to question that. We're just really not going to acknowledge it. So I think that lends some to it too.
Yeah, that's good point. Some good points there, Rich. I know we have a gentleman that works with us on the other show, who works for, he's still into forensics. He works forensics for an agency, and we had to last year, Shawn. You remember when we had to write the disclaimer?
Yeah.
His superiors, he did an episode with us. And they saw it. Somehow they found it and saw it, and he got to work the next day, and he got his ass chewed. And he said, "Well, it's a little late now. You might as well keep doing these episodes with these guys. But I want you to have them put out a disclaimer for the next episode." So we pretty much, I don't remember my exact words, but I had to write up a disclaimer stating that, listen, Mr. Barretto is not teaching us any official policy. He is not admitting that the subject matter of this show is real, so on and so forth. So they and he still continues to do it with us now, but I did have to write that disclaimer up last season. So
wow, that's crazy, because I mean, maybe things have changed now. Well, you look at what's happening right now in the mass censorship that's occurring to everybody, and they're certainly right now, the system is certainly trying to manipulate information and history and everything like that at this point. So
absolutely,
everything's changed.
They're trying to manipulate minds.
Yes,
It's social engineering. It's crazy.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, it is.
The damn masks, for one. I mean, like Gary, you said, the psychological effects of binding someone's face with a mask, is just, if you were to look at that from a psychological standpoint, I mean, I think people would be mind blown to find out what that does to someone psychologically.
Over a period of time, yeah.
Over a period of time.
Sociological, and a social, because we all have a yearning for identity. And when you wear a mask, it takes that identity away.
And it makes you feel, let's face it, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but it makes you feel like, not me personally maybe, but the populace, like slaves. Mm-hmm. I don't mean to sound that in any bad way, but you know what I'm trying to say. But if I'm not careful here, we're gonna
that's
but
ownership.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. That's a better way to put it. But yeah, well, we're gonna end up on another topic here.
Well,
anyway,
I got a quick question for Rich too. Listening to your voice and seeing you, I noticed that you have a First Nations lineage. Looks like. Has that had a?
No, actually not.
Really?
You don't? See, it sounded to me like you did too.
Yeah.
Gary and
I just look.
Compliment,
like it.
So that's a exit stage left even. I could have swore.
People make that mistake all the time.
Yeah.
Me too. Actually, my military DD. Oh, go ahead.
No, go no.
my DD2, my DD214 on my military paperwork says I'm Hispanic, but I'm 67% Western European.
Okay.
But and I'm not Hispanic at all. But I don't know. I just it's hard to say where it came from. Europe somewhere. I mean, you got to realize that. Well,
mistaken, correct?
What's that? What's that?
Your last name that's French, correct?
Yeah, but I'm not French actually. Well, kind of. I came from a region where my name came from. Basically would be the Netherlands right now, and my family spoke like 4 or 5 languages right there: Dutch, French, German, English, and but yeah, I mean, I've had my DNA done. Somebody did it for me, and so yeah, so you know, I do have DNA from North Africa, West Asian, and Eastern European Jew too. But you know, everybody, if you run your DNA, they're gonna find that kind of stuff in it. But so you never know. You could be a throwback. You might look like something.
Yeah, man. I've been doing it. I've been doing it too. My family's been doing it too, and it's really interesting. It's a lot of fun.
We found out Jeremiah's 2/3 Neanderthal.
I am.
Cool.
Fucking Shawn.
Me.
Nate, I want to hear from you. You've been sitting there all silent. What's the deal?
Oh man, I just been taking it all in, back to what we were talking about, it's pretty obvious, everyone knows they're covering it up. I think it goes up to the upper levels of management, trickles down and they just put a lid on it. It's kind of reminds me of the missing 411 stuff, the Parks Department and the Department of the Interior.
That's just
all the obstacles that Politis has looking into all that with the FOI requests and they're just they're obviously hiding a lot of stuff from us, and I think some of it might be connected too.
Yeah, without a doubt. A lot. You mean as far as what? Sorry, Rich. As far as like the different types, how many different phenomenons are going on at once?
I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and there could be multiple entities out there. Is Bigfoot responsible for some of the missing people? Probably some of them. I think they're more like a people. Then there's good ones, bad ones.
Absolutely.
People, and that may just be a small part of it, but obviously, it really pisses me off with that whole conversation, that the way they hide everything, and we can't handle it. We're just the little people, the peasants.
Yeah.
I just think people. I understand top secret stuff like technology and the military and all that, but this other stuff, though,
it's mind blowing.
It really pisses me off, actually. And I've been on this for a while myself, kind of what I've been focused in on. And you go back to we talked about it before, the way they took pieces out of the Bible. It's been going for centuries. They've been hiding shit from us, and then. You look at the giant bones found, and I was going to ask Rich about that, what he thought about the giant bones.
Okay. Ask away.
If they're possibly related to Sasquatch, or if they're Sasquatch, because that's kind of crossed my mind. And then, look, we talked about the early newspaper articles, which were pretty common from, going all the way back to 1700s, but especially 1800s, early 1900s. Where these landowners and farmers were digging up these giant skeletons. They're all missing. They're all hidden away. I mean, so obviously they're trying to hide that from us. And so, I've been pieces of the puzzle together, and I think a lot of that stuff is connected. I don't, it just, it's tough. So my question to Rich would be, I wanted to ask him this, is what he thinks about those skeletons. Is that related somehow?
I do know some about that, and I know about the elongated skull Paracas people, and I also know there's some people that I've talked to that I know pretty good that they've recovered elongated skulls even in Washington, but nobody knows about them really. And I think that there's probably a relation between these two things, and I don't know what it could be. I don't know, the mound builders and the stuff they recovered in the Midwest. That's maybe there's something different. Maybe there's something related.
Right.
But I think that what you guys are talking about, look at all this stuff of how it's all been hidden and suppressed, even though it's in plain sight. We don't know. But then again, I don't know if I can talk about this. But look about what's just happened to us. Where this massive fraud
we're not
against us.
You go right ahead and say whatever you want, buddy.
Okay, so you look at it, what's been done to us with this massive fraud perpetuated against us, and it's all in plain sight. Everything's happening, and they're just force feeding it down your throat, so they can steer whatever narrative they want. Same thing with COVID, and they can just kind of force you to believe whatever they want to, and just tell you the pieces they want and not tell you what they don't, and you don't really have a choice. And I think this kind of what's happening now kind of exposes the reason why we don't know anything.
Right.
So
it's amazing that after Biden gets elected, that all the Democrat governors now are saying COVID's not as bad as we thought. We got it under control. We need to reopen. Blah blah blah. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
To what? It's all destroyed already.
We're all on the same page here with that, Rich. Don't worry. So don't worry about that.
You're with like-minded people here, buddy.
That's right.
Cool.
But that's interesting. Now, what do you know about Nate? You kind of led me into another subject, which I'm glad you did. You hear about these mountain giants. What are your thoughts on that whole thing, Rich? If any at all, the whole
I'm not sure.
Phenomenon.
Well, the
Kandahar.
I know.
That could be related. I think it might be related this with the giants. If you think about it, most of the copper relics from the Bronze Age that exist in Europe and the Middle East and in Asia, the copper isn't from those regions. It's from North America.
It's from North America. It's very interesting.
Those artifacts are all from well before Columbus came over there. Those are from I don't know, BC 1000 AD. I'm not sure when, but what I guess in the Great Lakes region, there's evidence of mining and stuff there from ancient times. And there's like the past copper deposits are in the Great Lakes area, right? Yeah. So you look at this. So it's potential that the Phoenicians came here a long time ago. They were seafaring. There's been recoveries of Phoenician coins on the East Coast that are from BC time periods, really early Native American stories that they encountered people that were already here when they came. Yes. And so if you're going to come to mine copper, maybe you would bring with you giants if they existed, or big people that could do that, or a different race or a different species that maybe and they left some behind, and maybe that's where this mound builder civilization came from.
That's an
maybe
awesome
Bigfoot
theory,
is.
I'm going to be honest with you, never heard that before, but that's an awesome theory.
Well, why not? Because there's evidence of mining that copper, and they don't have an explanation for it. And you look at all the copper throughout the world, and it all mostly came from North America.
To me, anyway. Yeah.
How did it get everywhere? How did it get dispersed around Europe for the Bronze Age?
Exactly.
It's before the times of Jesus.
I mean, right? And the reason I asked that question because Gary, you got to help me out on this one. Where was it they caught that? I think it was had been the Canadian military with the satellite caught in northern Ontario caught something on. Caught something from on a satellite that was 19 feet tall. They say. Was it?
That was it was northern British Columbia.
Okay, British Columbia.
I never got video confirmation of that. I mean, that was just some of the guys was talking about it.
I heard about it. Yeah, I don't know. So that's what I was kind of thinking of. I know they call them the mountain giants. That's what I was kind of getting at.
That's something else that I've thought about too. You look at how could these things be undetected with satellite technology that's available? If they want to locate them, how can they not locate them in open areas in high country, utilizing satellites to zoom in real time and look. You know how close they can zoom in with these things. They can do way better than Google Earth with the stuff that they have, I'm sure. I mean, they can watch special forces do missions and everything from satellite, and they can see it all in real time, you know, in pretty good quality. So how could these things hide with the technology the military has related to satellites? I mean, just think about that. How long have they had that technology for?
Right.
So, Rich, we kind of been jumping all over the place, and we've been going in a million different directions here. I would love to hear about your encounter. Could
Yes.
you get into that a little bit and kind of roll through that?
Which one? The second? I told you about the first one, but you want to hear the second one then?
Yeah.
Here, I can tell another one in between that I don't tell very much, that I haven't told very much, if you want to hear it, because I did have.
Oh,
I'm not sure, but I potentially did. Okay, this happened after I was working in La Push, still at the time, and I was getting. It was 2002, I believe. This was a couple years after my encounter, and I just started going out further and fishing more like I used to do before, because the fear was wearing off of the initial encounter. And I was actually in this river called the Dickey, and there's some pretty good reports in that area from DNR workers and timber cruisers and different. It's a really dark, swampy area, a lot of spruce trees, and it's like what you would picture as a deep, dark rainforest. And the Dickey, I was in this spot up the end of this road called Mina Smith. And I didn't know anything about Bigfoot at this point, other than the fact that I'd seen the one, but I knew nothing else related to the topic. This was in the late 90s, and they're just, you know, basic stuff was available. None of this woo stuff was out there, anything like that. So
right.
I went hiking up the East Fork of the Dickey. I parked where the East and West come together, and right where I parked would have been like a spot where there was an old bridge that came across that intersected some logging roads on the other side of the river, and timber that had been logged about 20 years ago. So the trees were probably like 10, 12, 14 inches in diameter, and, you know, not that far apart. You know, they were, you know, 10 feet apart, and third growth planted trees probably, or maybe second growth, I don't know. So anyways, so I hiked up this canyon. It was March 1st, and I was steelhead fishing, and I was going up this little, it was not really canyon, this creek. It's a small river, and it runs through this kind of like shale canyon, and the water's kind of murky, but it's fair for steelhead fishing. And I've spent a fair amount of time fishing this river and caught a few fish and never hit it really good. But I thought today could be good because the timing was good and the conditions were pretty good. And I started fishing my way upstream, and I was fishing like bobber and float with jigs, and I figured I should have hooked fish, and I didn't. So I kept pushing up and up and up, and I had this like feeling I was being watched the whole time. And finally, I made it up about 1.5 miles upriver. I'd fished up about for 4 hours, and I got to a spot, and I finally caught a small female steelhead in it, and you know, I finally achieved what I was there to do. And I was like, I had this overwhelming feeling, kind of like, you know, my Harstein Island, where I just felt the hair standing up like I was being watched. I was attributed it to cougars or something like that, because I found cougar tracks on riverbanks all the time when I was fishing it. So I figured, you know, I'm going up to the spur, to the skid road that's up there, this logging road that's just up off the river, and I'm going to hit that, walk that back down to where the old bridge used to cross back to where my car is, because I can get out of here a lot faster than walking down in this hole and feeling like I'm being watched all the way out. I just didn't feel right. So I started getting out of there and making my way up and out, and I probably made it like 50 yards up out of the creek, and it was starting to flatten out again. And it's dark in there, kind of, I mean, light, but no sun gets through, and it had really tall slough brush. I don't know if you know what that is. It was like 4 feet tall, up to my shoulders almost, really tall stuff, and it was thick. And so I'm getting up there, and then I kind of stop for a minute and look around because I'm looking for this road. I don't see any sign of it yet. All of a sudden, something just starts crashing towards me, like really close. I mean, it starts coming at me like 20 some feet away, and it comes right at me, right? And I don't see anything though, but I can see the brush moving and this thing crashing, right? And it comes right by me so fast I can feel the wind of it go right by my face.
Wow.
It almost feels like it brushes against my shoulder, and I'm just standing there like, what in the hell just happened? I didn't see anything. I felt the wind, all the brush was crashing, and then once it got past me, it just stopped. And I'm like looking around, I'm looking down underneath this stuff. Is there something underneath I don't see? Because something just charged me and then just stopped right when it went past me. And I looked around for a minute, and I'm like, what in the hell was that? And then I just hightailed it back down to the creek, and I got out of there. But I never attributed it to Bigfoot for years and years and years. But later, much later, I started thinking about the feeling I was having, and then the fact that I thought maybe later that there's a high potential that it was a cloaked one that ran right by me. And that was an experience. It was very odd. I mean, I should have seen something. I could see the brush moving.
Yeah.
And I'm literally this thing right by me where the wind blows by me. So yeah, that happened, and that was probably in 2002.
Very interesting. Wow.
Harstein Island, though, that happened in 2010, and that was kind of towards the end of when I was really doing research. I really tapered off after that. And basically, I had ran for sheriff that year because I was a whistleblower, and I ran for sheriff so I could tell the truth about what happened with protection from a political campaign. And I lost, and I knew I was going to lose anyways. I didn't run to win. And so it happened to be the first day that legally you were bound to go out and start pulling campaign signs out so you didn't get fined for them. And I was driving around pulling signs, and I happened to be on Harstein Island where this incident occurred, and I had cameras. And I was coming down North Island Drive, coming from north to south, and I was going to pass by the spot, and I thought, I got some my camera keys with me, so I said I might as well stop and check a couple of cameras close to the road. And I didn't have a pistol with me that day, and usually I always carry a gun. And in fact, I wasn't wearing boots even. I was wearing tennis shoes. And this spot's kind of muddy and shit, but where my cameras are at, it's not very far from where I park. And so I thought I could get in there, at least check two, and then get out and just continue on my way. Figured I might as well take advantage of being there, because I stopped in this place probably a couple times a week anyways. I used to stop there on duty and not on duty, and it was like 15-minute drive from my house. Literally probably only about 5 miles from my house, or 4 as the crow flies. But it was across the salt water. There was a passage that made the island not connect the land there, and like a big river. But it was salt water. And so I was driving through there, and I decided I was going to pull over. So I stopped where I always park, which is this bus stop area. It's between these two roads off of North Island Drive, a house across the street that's where we started our research. And I had come back to this area after being gone from it for 6, 8, 10 months. I can't remember exactly. Started putting cameras back in here again, started walking around. And like I said, it was later on in my research. And I was doing more of an invasive type research at this spot where I wanted to make my presence known, because most places I didn't want to make my presence known more. I was just in and out checking cameras, and would come in every 6 months to a year. This place I was coming in a couple times a week. But, when I pulled in there that day, it was different, because as soon as I pulled in, I started to get this overwhelming feeling like I should just go home, like I shouldn't be there, like there was danger. And it was a feeling of dread, and there was no context for it because I'd been to this place a million times. I'm close to the roads. There's houses around. I shouldn't be afraid. So I ignored it. And so I got out of my car, and this feeling was still there, and I didn't understand it because there was no context for it. It didn't make any sense. So I just felt like I shouldn't pay attention to it and disregard it. But it was there. And so I first walked to a camera that was to the west of my car, about by a couple hundred yards through these trees, but it was along the one of the road I actually parked by. It was not in view of it, but it was probably 150 yards from it. And I get to the first camera, and this feeling's there, and the weather's overcast, and slight drizzle, raindrops every now and again. No birds making a sound, very quiet, very heavy air. Feel like you cut it with a knife. Everything felt heavy, like the world was on top of you. It was very odd. But I get to the first camera, and I see a big impression next to it. So I'm excited because I hadn't seen anything Bigfoot related since I've been going back in here. And so it got my mind off of being afraid, and made me more motivated to go to another camera. And then I was really excited to check that one. when I got home too. So, and I never there was no pictures on that camera later, just the impression next to it. So I go back towards my car, and then I take a left and start making my way to my other camera, and I walk towards it through this opening. It's kind of along the road, but down below it, and it's about 75 yards probably from the road, the path that I'm taking. So I walk down in there, and you get to a spot where there's some old junk laying around, an old outhouse, some tires, a burning barrel, and I had this camera set up facing towards me in the road. Behind it was this area that was kind of alders and some sparse salmonberries, kind of open. You could see through it, and it led up to this creek that wrapped around, kind of like dog-legged in front of you and came back towards you. It shot out directly in front of me, probably 80 yards to the creek, and it bends around, and it probably stays 80 to 100 to the corner where it comes in. And directly to the left is a real thick area of brush and cedar where you can't really see in. And so I'm walking down to this spot, and I still have this overwhelming feeling, and it feels like it's getting worse. And I'm still ignoring it because I want to check this camera, and I'm not going to. There's no reason for this fear. I just kept thinking that to myself. Where's this coming from? I have no context for this. There's no purpose for me to feel this way. And I'm just here, and I'm going to check one more camera. And by that time, I already decided I'm only going to check two, and I'm going to get out of there. So I get to the camera, and I have this big ring of keys on me. It's like 25 keys, master lock keys, because I use cable locks, Python locks to lock all these cameras to trees so they don't get stolen and stuff. And I start going through the keys. And off to my right, which would be to the northwest, on the other, from what it must have been from the other side of the creek, because I could see in front of me there where the sound was coming from, and there wasn't anything there. But it sounded close, but it couldn't have been that close because I couldn't see it. It was coming from beyond the creek and these cedars where you couldn't see it. And it sounded like something was just periodically snapping twigs. And there was enough question to it because I would hear these periodic raindrops, and it sounded like twigs, but also I was trying to tell myself, well, it could be raindrops, but it wasn't. It was twigs. I mean, it was clearly that's what it was. So I'm going through these keys, and through every key I was picking my head up and swiveling around, looking around because I'm feeling threatened, and I'm on the SWAT team and stuff like that already at work, and I'm a trained cop, and so I'm already thinking in a tactical sense and considering threats and what's threatening here and what's the risk level, and it's coming back to me saying, well, there is no risk, there is no threat, there's no reason to be worried, yet I have this intense sense of dread, death. The world's going to end. Everything's on top of me. Time standing still. I mean, I'm using all these terms to describe it, but yeah. They don't even describe it totally. It's something that you can't. I never experienced before. I haven't experienced after. A little bit there, Dickie, but not to the level. It was intense. So it keeps building as I'm doing this. I'm going through these keys, and I get like halfway through, and I hear this sound like a deer snort from the same direction as the twigs. So that actually gives me a little comfort because it's a sound I recognize, and it sounds like it could be a deer, but it wasn't quite right, but it was close enough to get my mind off of the twigs and the fact that I felt like I was going to die for some reason. And it got me back into my keys. So I keep turning keys, twigs keep breaking, and I'm telling myself I'm just out of here. If I have to go through these, I'm not going to go through this ring of keys again, because sometimes the locks wouldn't open because they get a little corroded because of rain. Mm-hmm. And so you have to wiggle them to engage them. And so I've broken keys off, so you got to be careful doing it, because if you break a key, then you got to cut it off with cable cutters. And I didn't want to waste the lock. They're like $20 or $16. So I keep going through, and I'm telling myself I'm out of here. I'm not going to stay through this. It's too scary. I don't know what's going on. And I get to the second to the last key, and I was relieved because it opened the lock. And so I start going through the process of pulling the card out, and I put a new card in, and I start pushing buttons to arm it again and turn it on. And I'm ready to put the cover on because it has to go through a process to arm, so you can press OK before it engages again. And just as I'm about ready to get doing that, right in front of me, not to my right where I was hearing all this stuff, but right in front of me, I hear this really deep gruntle, exhale, groan, growl, sigh. I don't know what you want to call it. And it was just of anger and disgust. And It was very loud. It like shook me to the core, and it was deep, and it was right in front of me. I felt like it was on top of me, and I was just scared to death because now this danger is here. It's right here. This everything I'm feeling, I'm dying right now. And so I paused, and I had my head down because I was looking at the camera, and I'm like, "Fuck, this thing is, excuse me, it's right on top of me." And I don't know, and I know what I'm going to see because we had resources in this area for a long time, and we knew all the animals. There was just deer, a few coyotes around, a lot of evergreen huckleberry in there, tons of it, and it was really tall. But we never saw any sign of bear at all. No scat, no tracks, no pictures of them, no nothing. So we knew they were in there, and this didn't sound like a bear. It sounded like a Sasquatch, if that's what they sound like. And I knew what I was about to see, so I was wearing a red Cabela's hat, and I just was frozen. And I knew I had to look because I had to make a decisive decision about what I was going to do because I was in massive danger is what I was feeling. And I started to lift my head up, and I distinctly remember the bill of my hat. And as I'm lifting it up, it's just uncovering this massive thing standing next to this tree like 20 yards in front of me, 60 feet or so probably. And it's just standing along this tree, and I could sense that it knew I was going to visually fully see it. And so as I'm lifting my head up and I'm seeing it, it starts to duck down in a real fast motion. And by the time I'm locked on it, it's down in a squatting position from standing upright, facing me like a gorilla kind of would be, to where it spread its legs out and it put its arms down between its legs, but it was locking its eyes on me. I couldn't see White's eyes or anything, but its face was on me. And then it just, in one motion, it moved in this incredible, unnatural speed. It shuffled to the right across about a 10 or 12 meter opening, and it was super fast. And that's something that I keyed on that I noticed in tactics, is that the speed of it and the fact that it was silent and when it moved, but it looked violent in its movement. It was smooth but violent in the speed because of the massive size. I mean, I would estimate the spot it was standing was a bit of a raised spot from where I was at. It was bare on like hard clay, and it was next to this really big diameter alder tree that was up. And there were some ferns up by the top of where its head was at, and its head was above the ferns by 6 inches probably. And I'd estimate it was somewhere between 8 feet and 8 feet 6. But what really stood out to me, it was V-shaped when it was facing me, and these massive arms were hanging there. Right when I was first lifting up my head, and I could see these massive arms that went up. It was shaped like a V, to where these huge freaking shoulders. If this thing was 8.5 feet tall, it was 5 feet wide at the shoulders. I'm not joking. And it looked like it just had a basketball stuck where the head was. There was no neck or anything, and these shoulders went out flat, right, with these deltoids shoulder muscles. I mean, I'm giving more description than I normally do, but that's what I keyed on, was these massive shoulders that were just unnaturally wide and large, where, I mean, the deltoid muscle would be as big as a basketball on each side, with these huge arms that hung down below the knees, and I could see in its hair, it looked black. It was kind of darker out, even though it was mid-morning, the sun wasn't out and there was clouds, and I could literally see stuff stuck in its hair from its back poking out over its shoulders, and on its shoulders there was like sticks and moss that it used, it looked like to me, for camouflage, and stuck in its own hair.
I was just
and
gonna ask. I didn't mean to
it had
cut you off.
literally, that's one of the things I totally remember noticing that I keyed on: the width of the shoulders, the outline of the head on the shoulders, and the stuff stuck on its hair. And I didn't smell anything. This thing just moved at this like incredible, superhuman, unnatural, cartoon superhero speed and silence. And then I remember thinking that, okay, it moved so fast. I keyed on the speed, and I was like, I was a sprinter in high school. I ran track, and I ran the 200 and the 100 meters. And I was pretty fast. But I knew that when I turned and I ran, I knew remember turning and running, and I saw the cable lock on the ground, and I thought to myself that how fast that thing moved, because it headed towards my car, so I thought it was flanking me. So I knew I couldn't go back to my car. I had to go to the road. So I ran straight for the road away from the camera, and I turned, and I remember looking out and seeing the cable lock and thinking, I'm not locking the camera. I just got to go. Because the speed in which that thing moved at 20 yards, I knew that even though that I was a fast runner and I was wearing tennis shoes and everything, and I could haul ass, is that if I turned and took 2 steps, it could be on my back, and there's no way I could get away from it. I mean, I knew that it moved. It looked like it was going 60 miles an hour. I'm not joking. I mean, it was like so fast. It was so fast that it was like, takes you back, the speed. And then I made it to the road, and I was hyperventilating, and then I got to my car, got in, broke into tears, and I drove home, and then the story keeps going after that. But yeah, you guys want to hear more of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as you want to talk about, man.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I go home and I tell my wife, and she notices that I'm shaken up, and then I make some phone calls, and I end up going back there a day later with another guy. I couldn't get Randall's to go with me. He was too busy, so I took another member of the group, and I looked all around where I saw it, no tracks or nothing, but the ground was really hard there. But I noticed right where it disappeared was a big pile of like really brittle sticks, and it must have stopped there or disappeared. I don't know. When I went back to the other side of the creek where I was hearing the twigs break from, I found a whole bunch of impressions there. It looked like something had run back and forth across this trail area, and it was really soft ground of like peat, sort of, decomposed cedar boughs on the ground, which creates a soft bottom. And there was a spot where there was a little nub, and there were 2 impressions right next to it, both facing the same direction, that gave really good toe impressions, but it was super soft and delicate ground, and it only went in like a 1/4 inch, but it gave all 5 toes and about a 14-inch foot. And there was no way you could cast it or anything. I thought about using powdered sugar or something on it to outline it, to photograph it, but it was very delicate. But it had ran back and forth, it looked like, across this thing multiple times. I don't know. There was a lot of evidence of tracks from it, but anyways, that happened, and immediately, within the first couple nights, I started waking up at 3 a.m. every morning and having a strong impression of me to quit doing cameras, quit looking for them. And it was like a third-person thing, and I'd wake up, boom, straight awake, and have these impressions in my head where, not voices or anything, it was just like boom, 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 stop looking, stop doing this, stop doing that. And it was like in a third person. And eventually, because I felt like, I was right where I wanted to be with this. And even though I had this traumatic event happen, and I shouldn't be feeling it like it this way, because I was feeling like I was right where I needed and wanted to be. So I was kind of ignoring it and trying to still continue, even though I was feeling like I needed to stop doing it. And finally, after a couple of weeks of this, because this went on for like 2 months, 60 days straight, probably, same time, exactly 3:00, I wake up wide awake, have this impression, then I'd be able to go right back to sleep. And finally, I asked, well, what happens if I don't stop? Because I didn't have any intention to at that point. I was starting to draw back because I just had this overwhelming feeling.
3 a.m. 3 a.m. You said every night.
Every night, 3 a.m. Yeah, and yeah, I know it's like the witching hour or whatever, but so this was happening and no consequence was ever expressed, and so I was drawing back because I had this overwhelming feeling, but I was fighting it because I still wanted to continue. But this thing was traumatic, this event, so it shook me. And so I kept doing it anyways, but I was only going back to Harstein, and I was grabbing my cameras and pulling them out of the field slowly, but I had like 50, so it took me probably 1.5 years to get them all. And I still have a few out there, actually, that I never got, maybe 4 or 5 in different places that are remote. And I went back and tried to find some, but couldn't find a couple. And other ones I've just never gone back to because it's a really big hiking commitment to get to them, and it's travel to get to them too. And someday maybe if they're still there. But anyhow, so I keep going back to Harstein, and I start trying to bait, and I go back multiple times, but I feel like I have boundaries at that point, and I don't really go deep in or anything. And I put a bait bucket out where I would try to give them food, and they didn't want nothing to do with it. A few times when I went there, they'd be inside. I could hear them. They would bark at me like dogs. They would mimic dogs from inside the tree line, coming just inside close to me. And you could tell it was like humans trying to mimic dogs. It didn't sound quite right. But other dogs that were close by would start barking. And it was always daylight when I go in there. I go in there and spend like 45 minutes, just stand there and walk around close to where I had the sighting. Another time I was in there one day, and I just got done being in there, and I was walking out. And right beside me in this spot I couldn't see, close to where the one I had the sighting, I heard one jump off of this cedar tree, because there's a spot that raises up to this knob, and you can climb up onto this tree where it hooks kind of dog legs right, and you could get up on it and see everything. And you're like 20 feet off the ground. So I heard it jump down distinctly off of that, hit the ground, and then take off bipedally, run, and crash brush and everything. And I got out of there because it was right next to me. But I went back the next day, and I looked around, and I didn't see any evidence of it, no tracks or anything. But it was right there. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it was right next to me. It was really close, within probably 30 feet of where I was walking. So it was watching me the whole time I was there, and then took off running, and I heard it. Other than that, that's about it. With that side, it eventually petered out. I still go back there occasionally. I take people there to show them around and everything, and I don't do research there or cameras anymore at all. But that story still keeps going. Probably the most significant and the weirdest thing that happened to me related to this whole thing, I think, the thing that has the most gravity and weight to me related to it, and really changed me the most out of the whole incident, probably was the fact of one night. Well, I'll get to this before. After, right towards the end of me getting woken up every night, the weather had gotten warmer. It was spring. It might have been May or June. Everything was pretty calm. I think I was still maybe even going there once in a while still at this point, just checking it out. I was working swing shift, and I was back on patrol. And I came home one night, and I pulled in my driveway. And as soon as I opened the door of my car and stepped out from right across the street in the bushes, I get like a volume 10 high-pitched Sasquatch scream that lasts about 6 seconds. So freaking loud, it's like in your ear. It's coming from right across the street from my house. It's like at 2 a.m. I just called out of service, just got out of my car, and my front door is like 30 feet away from where I opened my door of my car. And I just froze there for 1 second, and I just thought to myself, that didn't happen. And I just tried to ignore it. I walked in the house and thought about it for a second. I went to bed. I just didn't want to acknowledge it because it was way too personal to me. Because to me, I started thinking about it right away. I knew what it was, 100%, no doubt. It was a Sasquatch scream, sure. And they were at my house now, which the encounter happened on an island, right? So they didn't chase my car home, and I started figuring out at that point, I was discounting still, getting woken up at 3 a.m. I wasn't really saying that's them for sure. Maybe it's just my gut. I don't know. But then this thing happens, and so I'm starting to really consider the idea that there's something more going on with this. And I'd already been leading up to this for a couple of years through my research because of my experience, but I hadn't had any personal experience that was for sure really weird. This was starting to connect the dots and make it get pretty weird. Right. But I still wasn't listening completely, and I was probably doing 20% of the research that I was doing before up to this point, just because of the fact I was still going out in the field and grabbing cameras and going to Hardstein, and then I was also going to Dow Mountain still, which was another habituation site I was researching and gifting and stuff, and I was still going there occasionally. So this keeps going to where this incident occurs, and obviously, I've talked about that quite a bit, the scream, and another one that I've talked about more in the last year or two than I had before, because I didn't want to even admit this one to myself for a long time because it was just too much for me, just the gravity of it. It's so the significance of it when you consider it in the big picture idea. something I hadn't told you guys about, that whenever I did research, and it didn't really matter where it was. It could be in Hammer and remote areas, or Harstein, or many other spots I was going, Dwyer. And something I would always do is, it's somewhere where I was doing research. It didn't necessarily have to be near a camera or anything. It's just somewhere I was routinely walking through that I would go through on a regular basis whenever I was going to do a check. It might be at a remote place, like I said, where I'm not going often, but it's a spot where I would walk by that I would remember to look at. I would always build like a really simple stick structure. 3 sticks. I would try to find stuff that was, 3 foot high or so, maybe 3.5, TP them together, and then I would try to find a small stick to balance on top, right, and just leave it there. And a lot of times the balance sticks would fall off or get knocked off by wind or something, and I would just put these out at all the locations that I was at, just really crude and simple, just trying to establish some level of communication to let them know that, hey, I might be here looking for you. Do you want to communicate back? And they never had any success whatsoever with getting any stick structures back or anything like that. Except this one night, I was getting close to off of my shift, and I lived on a loop road which intersects a highway called Highway 3, and I lived on Great View Loop Road, which travels north to south, and it's about 7 miles total to go around the whole loop, and I lived right about the middle of it. And since I'm a deputy sheriff, each day, each shift, I could be assigned to work South County or North County, Shelton, or either in Belfort. And I didn't know generally until the sergeant decides to send you wherever you're going to go. Once you call in service, either they're going to have you come down to the roll call in the office and they'll send you to your district that you're in at that point, or they'll just call you in the radio and say, hey, you're working north or south, right? And that particular day, I think I was north, but sometimes there's not that many guys, so you might be going through the whole county. There might be only 2 or 3 guys on, and it's 900 square miles, so you could be going. I'd driven 600 miles in a day before, easy, when I did that job. In a 10-hour shift, 12-hour shift, I'd driven 600 miles, tank and a half, 2 tanks of gas, but in the Crown Victoria. But so anyway, so that particular night, you got to realize that I wouldn't generally know what direction I was going to be coming home from until probably within 45 minutes to the end of my shift. Whenever I'd start migrating back towards home, depending on where I was at in the county, would dictate which end of the road I would be coming in on, because I lived in the middle. That particular night, I was coming in from the north end, which you have to go through Allen to get there. It's a small town, and then you turn off the main highway onto this loop that travels around the water of Case Inlet. And how it's kind of laid out is there's a bunch of timberland mixed into it. Green Diamond owns a whole bunch of timber land, especially on the inside of the road, and the outside of the road has mostly houses that are waterfront. And there's little coves, and there's a marina there, but then there's timber too in between, and slough, and a lot of Scotch broom and stuff along the road, and little canyons and creeks, and you have little inlets and stuff that come in there. And I was coming through this area where the road starts to turn, and there's timber on my right, and there's a bunch of Scotch broom, and there's a left turn, and if you continue forward, it kind of veers down to the right and goes down and dips before it pops back up, because it goes over a little creek bridge in a canyon, and then pops back up the road. And it's an improved road with big shoulders for people on bikes and runners and stuff. And there's a lot of super rich people that live in this area. So it's really nice, And I didn't live in a super rich house or nothing. I lived up off the water, but at the entrance to a bunch of waterfront houses. And so the freakiest thing happened. I'm just happened to be coming home, and this is probably 10 to 2. It's dead, there's nothing going on. But you have to realize I live pretty close to the Bremerton shipyard, and it's got like 15,000 civil service employees, from pipe fitters to electricians, and they do fix ships and do nuclear refuels and defuels. And a lot of people that work there live on the loop that I work on, and they have 3 shifts a night, and there's people coming and going all the time. So you have to realize that even 24 hours a day, that on the loop that I lived on, it was rare for 10 minutes to go by and not have at least one car drive by. come in each direction, even at 2 a.m.
Right.
So it's not like, and it was warm. It was like 75 degrees out at 2. It was like June, and I think it was late June. This was a month or two after the scream happened to me in my driveway. So I'm driving down the loop road headed south from the north, and I'm probably at like the 1.5 mile marker. And I come around this corner, and my headlights light up on my lane. It's dry, and right in front of me I start to see like a debris field, right? And it looked like a mower had gone around through the area and chewed up all the Scotch broom. And that's what I focused on first, and I started to slow down and come to this thing because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And in the road, in a circle, right, a real symmetrical circle, there's all these pieces of Scotch broom that are kind of frayed on the ends, and some of them are long, like 3 or 4 feet, because big Scotch broom, and some pieces are short, and everything is pointed all in the same direction in a circle, right, like a star, right, and it spreads out to cover up both lanes of the road mostly, but not as much towards one direction, and it goes for a certain depth of this debris field that's in a perfect like circle with this stuff laid out. Like something took a tremendous amount of time to lay all these pieces out to make this. It's hard to explain without drawing a picture, but it looks like a snowflake almost poking out to the sides, but it's not like nice like a snowflake. Everything is pointed away from each other, like from outside of the circle to inside of the circle, going around the outside. And it looks like in the center of it is like an eye, which is totally clean and clear. There's nothing inside, and that's right in front of my lane where my car is. And right in the center of that circle is a three-stick teepee with a balance stick, exactly the crude, simple one that I made and put out at all these different research locations.
Holy shit.
And this is back in like 2000. Yeah, and this was in 2000. This is right when Finding Bigfoot just started coming on TV, like the first season. So it was probably was 2011, I believe, sometime. I think it might have been the second season, but it was during Finding Bigfoot in the beginning. And so I pull up to this thing, and I just stopped my car, and I'm like, what in the hell is this? I was like, did some kids screwing with me or something like that? I just was thinking to myself, I was like, this is my structure. This isn't possible. And the way it looked, I mean, it looked like a UFO just touched down and just put this thing here just like it was. It was crazy. So my instinct was, I stopped my car and I looked around and like, what is going on here? It was just totally surreal. And I got out of my car and I kicked it over. I just wanted to like forget this ever happened. I didn't want to acknowledge it. And I drove home and I just said, well, that didn't happen. Somebody was messing with me. But really, logically, nobody could have been messing with me. The thing is that whatever did it for me to find it there. And it knew when I was going to be in this spot at that time.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to consider and start to realize that whatever did this did it for me. And it wanted to put my thing there. I realized right away that whatever did this wasn't playing by the same rules of time and space. So that's a pretty big deal. And to me, that all this stuff to me is a projection of power. And it's just showing me what capabilities that they had that I didn't understand. And I can tell you, when I was getting woken up at 3 a.m., I have a lot of questions related to that part. Because the impressions always came in a third person type thing. And I'm not sure what it was that was communicating with me, because it wasn't coming from me. And it was always in like a third person type thing. And I'm not sure what that is. I'm still not sure. It could be God. I don't know. Something warning me, guardian angel. I don't know. Could have been them. I don't know. But this incident in particular, all these things, like showing up at my house at night at 3 a.m., finding this thing in the road, that was meant for me in my car to find it at this time. And I didn't know, like I said, what direction I'd be coming back. And it just lends to me that you're dealing with something that has abilities that we can't comprehend and we don't understand. And that we don't really know what we're dealing with. But from a tactical perspective and thinking about it with risk assessment, to me, it makes me realize that I had no control, and that I'm dealing with something that defies logic and classical science as we see it and understand it. So, and it wanted me to know all these things because they knew that, or whatever was trying to tell me this, knew that I would consider this, right? I would consider these aspects of it and the significance of the details and the evidence related to the incidents, right? I would consider the tactics and the risk assessment to it, which would lead me to an understanding that I'm dealing with something that I don't really have any idea. And I don't know that the capabilities are beyond my comprehension. So, but yeah, that was kind of the end of that part of the incident. It keeps going further, even at my new house where I live now, and it got really weird for a few years before it finally all ended, and it's mostly all done now. Tobe Johnson comes over to my house every now and again and does some stuff, and we look around. We found a few stick structures around the house, and I had a lot of. It was hot and heavy at my house here for a while. I called him here after about 8 months. I moved up here, and there had been historical stuff that had happened around, and I did wood knocks and got an answer back after a few months, and they showed up at my house and did Ohio howls, and we had them around here for a couple of years almost, maybe. And everybody that lives here, we have kind of a compound, so we live on 20 acres, and I have a house down by the road, and then my parents have a house up on the hill behind, and my brother has a cabin here. Him and his girlfriend used to stay here all the time, and we have 2 rental cabins that are up above too. And so there's people all around, and nobody saw one, but people heard stuff. People got their house. My brother got his cabin slapped a few times with his girlfriend inside, and then I found tracks up behind the house, and I found other evidence of stuff, trees pushed over, different stuff, a lot of rock clacking, monkey chatter, different things, and then it kind of all ended. I was dealing with a couple of mediums actually that were trying to facilitate teaching me how to remote communicate with these things, and it wasn't me that pursued any of that. They did. Allegedly, these Bigfoots contacted these people and had them contact me to try to. It's crazy. I tried it. I kind of went through some of the steps and processes of it. It never really worked out for me, and it ended up kind of all going away. Kind of. It's still around because, like, I'm dealing with you guys, and I do this kind of stuff, and this part of it doesn't go away because it's an interesting story line, and people want to hear about it. And I don't do active research or anything anymore. I mean, once in a while I'll go out and hike around where I live and look for sign and stuff. If like Tobe comes over, I found stuff close to where I live. I have a road that I can walk here, and I found stuff along that road, and my brother found a track on it one time with his girlfriend, and so occasionally I do stuff. I don't travel to go do it, and I definitely don't stay the night out anywhere. I just can't do it, and I can't even think about doing cameras. I can't even do a recorder. I just can't do it. Toby tried to get me to set up my recorder here, and I wanted to, but I couldn't do it. I mean, I feel guilty. It's so weird. I mean, after this whole thing happened, every time I think about doing stuff, or if I try to take steps to go research, I can't do it. I mean, I've tried to set up. Ron Moorhead wanted me to do set up doing expeditions with just small groups and charge a lot of money with no expectations. Just take them out for like 2-day trips. And, I just couldn't do it, and then we did. I tried to set up a couple of outings, with groups of people here, and they just fall apart because I just can't follow through. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I just don't know how else to tell you other than just tell you that there's something in me that won't let me continue to do it. There's just, it's not amount of I feel guilt. I don't feel like consequence or like anything's going to happen to me. I just feel like I can't. Something in me just tells me you just can't do this anymore. I mean, I can talk about it, inform, discuss my story and everything, but I'm never going to go out and look for these things again. I'm never going to go out and do research for them. I'm satisfied in my own mind after the DNA study and everything that I was engaged with and my own experiences. And I have some, understanding and comfort in it in myself. At least I have some knowledge of what I'm dealing with and what I saw. That gives me enough confidence to understand that I'm dealing with something that's likely superior in many ways.
Right.
Tactically, ability, and to be cautious. And at some point, if I happen to see one again, because I've seen them twice, and I don't think that there's any coincidence to that. I don't think it's random at all. I think there's a purpose to all of the sightings and all the encounters. And like me in my life, it took me on a huge path, and it really helped to bring out a lot of traits in me that already kind of existed, where I was an independent thinker and I questioned things, and I went on, it just opened this door, and it was like a gateway drug, the first encounter, because I didn't get involved in research for years and years afterwards, but it really pushed me to be more confident in myself, and to trust myself and to trust my instincts more. And that was the thing that built up over years, because it wasn't until Harsting happened that I really committed fully to just listening to what my gut says.
Right.
After that, I mostly did, and it was an asset to me throughout my law enforcement career and most of my life. But at the same time, sometimes I would discount it if it was in my interest to do so. But then after Harsting, I never ignored my gut ever again after Harsting, because it was telling me the whole time, and I just wasn't listening, and it was so apparent. But yeah, it's an amazing. I feel like totally fortunate that these things have happened to me, and I've had these experiences, because it's changed my life in such an incredible way, and it really what it's taken to I live different now. I'm not a cop anymore. I don't have any bills. I work, but I work when I want to. And basically what this experience has allowed me to do is to become free, I guess you could say. I have as much liberty and freedom as I possibly can exercise in the circumstances that we're in. And I think it's made me recognize the value of that, and that necessarily the rat race that we're all engaged in, that we are kind of trapped in to participate in, the dollar and everything that we live for and that we have to do to live. I've tried to mitigate as much of that as I can, and try to just be a free human, now.
Right.
Because I think there's so much more going on than what the little box that we live in, that based on what I've seen, I had this opportunity to see that most people don't get this chance, and people that see Bigfoot or have these experiences get this unique opportunity to expand their minds, because they're being exposed to something that the vast majority of people don't get to see. It's like a gift of getting to find out that the world, there's more to it than meets the eye. There's way more going on than what we see in the life that we live. And it's this gateway into this whole nother realm, really, in many ways, when you consider everything.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is. It certainly changed my life.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
It's all of our lives, Rich.
Yeah, it's definitely changed all of our lives. I know I can speak for Shawn, Gary, and Nate, like you just said too. It's changed every one of us, every way we all of us live. I know that much. But guys, I hate to freaking do this, because I could go on. Rich, I could let you go on all night, man. But I'm starting to get the stink eye in there from the old lady. So,
oh no.
I'd definitely love to have you come back on at some point, man. If you'd be
I'd come back, whatever. I ain't doing nothing.
All right, man. I got to tell you, that was great, man. And we really appreciate you coming on, man. That was phenomenal.
Oh, no problem. I was glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Phenomenal, man. Just phenomenal. Now that I got your email address, I'm gonna I'll send you a couple points you hit on, man. Reminding me a couple of my own experiences. I'm gonna send you some stuff to get your opinion.
Yeah, no problem. Because I don't have many people. I don't get many messages in there, and I'm not on social media anymore.
Yeah,
I had a Parler account, but there's no point. I never had it. Really was active with it, but now Parler, there's no point with that anymore. So I tried to sign up for.
Bongino says it's coming back in a few days. Have some hope, brother.
That's me, right?
Oh, I'll get back on there, but yeah, I mean, I'm ready almost just to not just to go dark for a while, maybe too. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I get it for sure. Yeah. Oh, but I'll like I said,
it on Facebook so many times.
Oh yeah, Shawn, you've been in jail a lot. That's for sure.
I don't even have a page anymore.
I've never.
They took my messenger down and my.
I haven't either, Gary. Yeah, but like I said, Rich, I'll send you some stuff just to get your opinion, man, because it reminded me of a few of my own things, and I'll send you our link too first for the show, and I'll send you this once we get it all edited out and posted tomorrow. But
sounds
good.
Thanks
a lot, brother.
I'd like to add something.
Yeah, go ahead, Shawn.
I've heard this story before. We're getting feedback. There, it's gone. Now I watched something on YouTube with Rich, and the whole story. What he just told us is almost word for word what he had said before. What I had seen in the past. It's been a while since I've seen it, but he's not a bullshitter.
No, hell no.
I mean, everything. Most people will embellish and shit changes. His story is exactly the same as it was.
On point.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can tell, I mean, man, this was a great interview. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah,
awesome.
Oh, no problem.
I second that, Shawn. That was we really appreciate it, Rich. That was amazing. Thank you, Nate.
Well, I'm happy. I'm happy.
Rich.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Nate.
I'm happy to do any of these things.
Awesome, man. We will definitely be back in touch with you for sure.